Patty, if so many of us logically know we are enough, why does it feel unsafe and so hard to believe it?
Oh, it's such a great question. You're just straight off the bat because it isn't logical. So we can know logically. I mean, we can't do this work from the neck up. It's because our brains have lots of great information that help us every day make decisions and do certain things. But our emotional self, our emotional body isn't in our logical mind, it's in our body memory. So, what gets set up early on in my work is this feeling of not good enough for various reasons. And we'll, you know, probably touch on some of them in our conversation. But if it's set up in our subconscious mind, our nervous system, there's no language in it. And so it's not logical to say, oh, I'm enough. Okay. So, yeah, that's why my work is so complex in terms of helping people understand how you get to really transform this body memory. And it isn't as easy as just saying, I'm good enough.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because you mentioned that that this cannot happen, or healing, or just believing cannot happen from the neck up. And I've tried many times with a lot of different things. So if we know that, why do keep it? Why do we keep trying anyway?
Because that's the world we live in. We live in a left brain logical world for so long. Hopefully that's starting to shift a little bit where people are learning a whole lot more that about being human rather than what our brain stories our brains make up. And because we know in the first 6 years of life, we're highly impressionable by messages we get in our environment. And so we know that children under the age of 7 can't distinguish fantasy from reality. So if you say to a child, what's your problem? You'll never amount to anything. You should be ashamed of yourself. What do you think you're doing? And parents do it with the best intentions, right? Because this is what we've learned. This is old parenting, punitive parenting stuff that's been going on. We think we're not spanking anymore, but we're still shaming as a form of discipline. So in the first 6 years of life, we absorb all of that and we become what we're told we are. So if you're, for instance, a client who has an eating disorder and she's told, I'm not very smart in school, so I need to be, I need to be thin. So the message that she makes up in her mind is, in order to get love, I have to be thin. So her nervous system starts to create a behavior pattern of not eating food and counting calories and getting on the scale. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on until she realizes that this was an early childhood setup in the subconscious programming. Because I don't know how much you know about disordered eating, but it's really hard to tell somebody who's got an eating disorder to just eat food, right? It's and that in your logical mind would be the solution. So that's why you can't do it in the mind, because the nervous system starts going, oh, I better not do that, better not do that, better not eat food. And that's why we call it the autonomic nervous system. It's automatic and it's subconscious and nonverbal, and it's running behind the show all the time. So I work with the nervous system regulation, like what's the fear? I mean, I can give you other examples too, but that's a pretty clear one to look at.
Yeah, I truly find this fascinating because, funny enough, I was talking to a friend the other day about all of this. How it's not even what other people tell us; is what our brains make of that.
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as, let's say, whether you are 6 year old, 8 year old, or 10 year old, whatever, and you get home with an A. I mean, you got home with an A, and your parents like, "Oh, that is so awesome! Congratulations!" and all of that. Your brain might randomly, unconsciously create a story like, "Oh, love is conditional. It's conditioned on me
Yeah.
achieving things," and then you become a overachiever that is never enough, and you feel empty because it's so ingrained into your identity, into who you are, into your subconscious mind and nervous system, that you have a lot of people either being people pleasers or being a perfectionist, maybe one of
Mhm.
them, or trying not to be, or even with these eating disorders, is kids are so we as kids are wired to seek the love and approval of our caregivers. It's how we survive. So we need to do everything in our power to get that without realizing what we're doing it.
Yeah.
It is sad, but it's also fascinating how crazy that is, how we can live with that for years and we think it's part of our personality when it was always a survival strategy because our brain felt like this is the only way that we can survive. It is the only way that we can get love from our caregivers. When that happens, how do, because I know that some people are in big denial. I've talked to some friends and I can very
Hmm.
quickly spot the patterns and they think, no, 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 this is just who I am. If somebody feels whether it's an eating disorder, whether they are people pleasers or perfectionists or overachievers, how can they become conscious of it and understand that it was just a adaptation rather that what they are made of?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you described it really well. That was beautifully said. I mean, that's exactly right. And the how do you change that is really hard. I have a worksheet that I use that I actually just sent to somebody who, because it's a woman I'm working with an eating disorder, that's why I was present in my mind today, that particular situation. Because in order to change the subconscious pattern, we have to actually trick the subconscious into feeling safe in the situation. So food isn't safe for someone with disordered eating. So how do I feel safe? So I have this exercise that I ask people to do. It's called my 3-act day, where you affirm it's safe to eat food. You connect, see, to something that feels good, because we want to get into our sensory modality. So she likes music. So play a song you really like while you're eating food, and 3 times a day, you affirm that it's safe to eat food. You connect with something that feels good, like a song. And the T is trust, that even though it feels really weird and awkward, and I don't want to do it because my nervous system's going, no, 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 I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to do it for 90 days because that's what it takes to change a pattern, right? And that's, when people go into drug and alcohol recovery, that's what they say, 90 meetings in 90 days, because you got to have the repetition, repetition, repetition. Otherwise, you're going to go back into those old patterns that you described. I think of it as like, when you get an organ transplant, you get or they call it immunosuppressant medications, so that the body doesn't reject the organ. So it's a similar thing when you're trying to tell the nervous system, we want to do something different here. That's not really a story that's going to keep us safe. It's a story we learned as a kid, and yay for that nervous system for making that up and figuring it out, and it worked. It does not want to change. You cannot tell it to change. You have to trick it somewhat into changing by going, okay, all right, I'm going to find safety in this new story, and I'm going to act as if I'm going to practice every day. Bruce Lipton, who studied epigenetics, says, we can actually change our cellular memory, but it requires changing the environment, changing our perception. And the thing I say all the time, repetition, repetition, repetition. And this is why you can't just say, okay, I'm going to eat today and it'll all be better. And that's what that brings up. We're talking about shame here. That's feeling of not being lovable. Brene Brown defines it as that excruciating feeling of being tragically flawed and unworthy of love and belonging. And that's what we're talking about, is a neurobiological experience of not feeling lovable, or what I call shame, but people think that shame's a different thing. They don't quite get what I'm trying to say. So I love that we started off with it's not enough, not unlovable. But that's in our biology. And in order to change that, we have to write the new story and work on getting it into the body memory. And so what I was going to say is, it brings up shame because we can't do it like that. That's the thing. This is why it gets so hard. Sometimes why people leave therapy, because they feel like, oh, I think I've made some progress, but then they come back the next week and they go, none of this is working. And then, but what do? They internalize that they're a failure, that they're not good clients, that they're not good at therapy, when it's really the fact that no, it takes a while to rewire the nervous system, and we have to have so much compassion. which is part of what we haven't learned either. When we've been raised, in ways that say you're not good enough, you're not this, you should do this, you should do that.
I love everything that you said because that's something I've been trying to do to myself for a while. And I think I believe that yeah, it's true that a lot of people feel that they go to they feel shame or they feel like they're not mm, good enough or the therapist enough for them or they're broken or there's something wrong with them. It's just because once again it takes time, but also I think it's lack of understanding, lack of awareness. Because one thing that has helped me, and I don't know whether it's nature, nurture, how my brain is wired, who knows, right? I've had like a higher level of awareness where I can detect the pattern. Okay, this is what's happening. Now I can understand logically this is happening, this is not true, because that's the other thing. I think that's why we struggle so much. Is something that I call the emotional reasoning. We feel it, therefore it's true. It's like, okay, if I feel food is unsafe, right?
Mhm.
The fear is real because we're feeling it in our body, but the message that our brains associates with food is not true. It
Right.
was a story that your brain made up. And even though and this is with me another with other fears I have, is I understand it, and yet it's like so much resistance from our nervous system, from my nervous system, that I'm like, body, I understand, we're safe, and yet I need you to snap out of it because I need to get going. I need to really do things. There are some things when it comes to exposure, when it comes to being seen, for me at least, as somebody who grew up for many years shy, introverted, with high level of social anxiety, because I used to stutter a lot for like 20 years or so, that to me, even doing things of creating content or reaching out to companies for keynote or for coaching, it feels so vulnerable, so much fear. And in my mind, it's like, it's just, I, I'm trying to create a new story. And yet, one thing I've found out is that you need to keep exposing like micro exposures to your nervous, because that memory was experienced, then you have to feel it to sort of heal. It has to be more somatically rather than rationally, which can be frustrating because in some people it might be, as you said, 90 days or something. I guess for some people it might take longer, some people might take, shorter amount of time, depending how ingrained that story is in their subconscious mind, into their nervous system. But yeah, part of it is like, man, it's so frustrating because if I work alongside with my nervous system, I mean, anybody can achieve anything. It's just that resistance is what's blocking us from either leaving that relationship or launching that business or moving to a new city. It's just that fear that we are going to lose ourselves. You mentioned on your TEDx talk about that not enoughness cannot be fixed.
Yeah.
And what do you think people misunderstand about or fixing shame? Because I think in my mind, shame is something that you can control in terms of how you the stories you tell yourself consciously.
Right. Yes, and that's kind of what I was hearing in the question was, do we ever get there? We have it's called the promised land syndrome. I think Carolyn May say once. It's like we have this idea that we're going to get somewhere, and when we've got our shame figured out, and man, we're going to be these, enlightened beings. No, I do this work myself. I'll admit it every day. Every day I work on my shame. So what do? I take a deep breath in. I say, I am enough. You know, and I'm aware of it. I'm conscious of it. That's the difference. It's the difference between being conscious of it and it being lost in the subconscious, because when it's lost in the shadow, as Carl Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress because we fear that they're bad, they cause us to act in ways we don't understand. So like you were saying earlier, some people don't want to like even have this conversation. They're like, I turned out all right, that's just a bunch of, yeah, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like, you know that's their choice. Okay. However, I think the reality is, as human beings, the evolution of consciousness is getting high. I'm hopeful to a point where we will be able to be a lot more conscious about all that's why I started my Inner Space Project podcast, to explore all the parts of us, because we're going to outer space to explore, outer space, but we don't even know what's happening in our inner space. We don't even know what's going on in here because it's been taboo. Don't be upset. We were talked out of our feelings. This is the old parenting stuff that is just now starting to change. I mean, it's really brand new to have conversations with children and other people where we can be emotionally expressive and have emotional agency and understand what we're feeling. It's all brand new. So to think that we can like fix our shame and be good, and move on is to me not a reality. And I think that's again the harder part for people to get is that we're human beings and we're learning and we're changing so many things that are familiar to us. And I think in my TED talk, I put the word familiar up in a slide and said, it's got the two words in it, family liar. So many of the things we learn in our families aren't really true, right? And so to be able to give ourselves permission to look at what our truth is requires facing the fears of being told we were supposed to be a certain way in order to be loved. And that's a lifetime or lifetimes. I used to joke years ago, I have my master's in early childhood education. I studied in Virginia with one of the best well-known early childhood educators, Catherine Kersey, and she's passed away now, but she was amazing. And I wanted to be a parent educator. I wanted to help parents learn how to parent better. And my joke was, and I did that for a while, for like 5 years for a pediatric group. And then I went back and got my PhD and, became a therapist. But I still believe that children are our greatest natural resources and parents are so important. However, parenting has changed drastically even in the past 50 years, and parents are still learning how to do it. And it's going to take a while to change how we do that. It's going to take generations. So my joke was, I want to do parent education because I believe in reincarnation, and maybe like 5 to 10 generations from now, I'll be born into a family that's finally got it figured out. But nobody's going to figure it out in this lifetime. We're not going to get it in this lifetime, and maybe never. Who knows? It's with AI and robots, why bother? We just robots
Yeah.
don't have emotions, even though ChatGPT seems to understand them in some weird way. I can't figure out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, I will say this though, in terms of maybe if we reincarnate in 5 lifetimes or 10 lifetimes, if we are born quote unquote in a perfect environment, then what's the point of life? Because I think the point of life is just going through all the struggles, and it's just. I was talking to a friend of mine who has twins. They are like 4 years old now, and I said, I bet. I mean, maybe you might not see it now, even though apparently he has that they share the same DNA, they share the same experiences, something will happen, and one of them, their brain is going to read it in one particular way, the other one will read it in a whole different way. One would be just a passing event, for the other one might be a micro trauma. So even if you are in the same conditions as another human being that you share DNA with and experiences with, you're still going to have to, I guess, go through your trials and tribulations in life, like things that you need to sort of overcome. And it's one of those things that that's why it is very popular now, I guess, at least in social media, how, well, millennials or Gen Zs are the cycle breakers because now we finally go to therapy and, all these things. But it is true. See, there's something that I wasn't aware of I until I got divorced, until my marriage was over, because I had to go through a lot of introspection and trying to understand things. And one of the things was, when growing up, my mom, she's awesome, she's great, I love her, but the way that she raised us was to focus on the things that we didn't do. The one of the best examples I have that I remember very clearly, one day I get back from school and she calls me because she's at work. I say, hey, can you please clean the kitchen? Because by the time I get home at night, I'm tired. I wanted just to have it clean. Like, fine, I was probably 11 or 12 or something. So I go wash the dishes, sweep the floors, clean the tables, all of that. She gets home, and I'm standing at the entrance of the kitchen, just waiting for her to see her reaction. And the first thing she says, "What about the countertops?" I'm like, "Mom, but
Oh,
I did everything else." Yeah, but the whole kitchen. Now she didn't say it in a mean way, in an angry way, but it's like, you forgot that.
yeah.
And as a matter of fact, is she was raised by her mom in the same way, but
Hmm.
she wasn't aware of it, and that was a learned behavior that I used with my ex-wife without even knowing that she would try to do some stuff, and I would only focus on the things that she didn't do,
Hmm.
and that can I guess subconsciously can make the person question themselves, like, do they even love me? Because if they focus only on the negative, and I remember telling my mom about it. Say, hey, look, I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying that I became aware of this. You were oblivious to it. You were doing the best you could, but those are the things that we pass from generation to another one.
Hmm.
There are behaviors that we, until somebody becomes aware of those, and that can be also be about shame, how we see adversity. I think when you talk about raising our level of consciousness, which is definitely something that we need, for me, it is easier to have conversations for whatever reason with women. I think they're more open minded in terms of their inner world, and I guess it makes a lot of sense because you guys go through periods and the hormonal changes, so you need to understand that at deeper level. With men, even though I have good friends of mine and I have deep conversations, it is harder for me just because they don't have the language or the comfort to
Hmm.
enter into those conversations. They feel like something is off, and that might be some shame behind it, that if I feel some level of discomfort in my body, I don't want to have
Hmm.
this conversation. It might be helpful, but I don't want it. How have you found, or at least one of the best ways or the easiest ways to for people to increase their level of awareness and consciousness?
Well, you talked about a couple different shame stories there. That story of mom saying, "But what about the counter?" That sets up a story in the neurobiology, a shame story that says, what I did my best, but it's still not good enough. So I need to be better. And you mentioned earlier that you're a recovering perfectionist, overachiever. No surprise, right? That's the story that you made up. And actually there can be strengths in that, because here you are today, offering something that is really helpful for people and you want to do it well. That's not a bad thing. It that's what I'm talking about, the difference between conscious and unconscious. If you were unconscious of that, you could be I don't know, I'll go a whole different directions in terms of what you do with your overachieving. There's a lot of people in the C suites, and unfortunately, even we're not going to mention our government, who maybe want to do things really well, but it's not about using it for the higher good of all. So that's a shame story. And the other one was, I forgot. Now I forgot. You said something else about,
Around uncomfortable conversation about people's inner
oh,
worlds
men.
and
Yeah, men and
Mhm.
women. Yeah. So what about the whole thing about big boys don't cry? You know, don't be emotional. That whole talking ourselves out of emotions. I think, men and women are born anatomically different, and their brains are wired differently. Men tend to have, and I hate to stereotype, especially with gender fluidity these days, and it's not necessarily even about gender. However, I can't say most, but many men are more left brain and women are more right brain. And the left brain is the logical mind, the right brain is the sensory, intuitive, feeling mind. And what we really want, Carl Jung called it the inner marriage. We want to have both, a balance of both, no matter what gender we are. And so women, because we're wired, it makes it a little bit easier. But, I know a lot of women that, have tried to be successful in a male world, and they've shut that part down, and they are in their logical mind too. And I know a lot of overachieving women who just struggle with the do. It's this whole idea. I've got to be perfect. I got to do it better. This is a very common theme of, what gets set up in the nervous system. It's just not good enough. I got to do it better. Men, on the other hand, um, they're not going to necessarily connect to the emotional piece as much. So whether that's because, again, they were told big boys don't cry, don't be emotional, or most of us have all been raised in families where, our emotions have been shut down, except for some of the younger generations, but it's still new. It's still new, because feelings are uncomfortable. I mean, historically, it was we don't have time for that. We need food and shelter, and we gotta it's like put your big girl pants on and get going. You don't have time for emotions. Men and women are wired very differently, and I really feel like the evolution of consciousness needs to have so much more men like you, because I've talked about this a lot with people that women, because we've been a little bit more open and willing and wanting to raise awareness. Men have kind of that they're not exactly sure how to adapt to women's roles changing, and that's how we do it is by connecting to our emotional selves. I don't know. It's complicated because I don't think it's black and white or easy. I just think that the whole idea is we want to have a balance of masculine and feminine energy, or what we could call right left brain. So we need our logical mind, like your very first question was like, why can't we just tell ourselves that da da da? We need that logical mind. We need the structure. We need the organization. We need to have a plan. But when we are we overcompensate in that arena, we don't allow ourselves to feel these other pieces, and that's where the real change happens. And that's the scary part, because sometimes feelings don't feel good, and we've been told not to feel the bad feelings, so we feel bad about our bad feelings and that our bad feelings are bad when they're not. I always say all feelings are okay, but all behavior isn't. That's a brand new thing, because it used to be, don't be angry. Well, be angry, just don't hurt yourself or somebody else. Do something with the anger, because anger teaches us. It's like I always say, it's like the red light that comes on in your car when you need to get it serviced. That's what anger is. It's like an indicator light that's saying something in me needs attention. Anger is like a very volatile emotion that we notice, but there's all the other ones too. So if we can look at them with compassion and have agency with them, boy, what the world, I think, in my idealized mind, the world would be a much better place. But you're right. You made a good point earlier. What if we were all born with all love and light and everything is good? Planet Earth would not be the same. And, maybe we'll evolve to that. Maybe we won't. But I also feel like we're a little out of balance right now with the love end. We got a lot of the fear and the power, and we need more love and compassion.
That's why I love these kind of conversations, right? Yeah, well, I think that it will never be in a perfect world, because I think we need the duality of things. First of all, like, okay, if we're all happy all the time, are we even happy? If we don't have anything to compare it with. But when it comes to men and women, what I found fascinating, and I've heard this in the past, and I think it makes a lot of sense to me, is that many men or many women or most men or most women, the way that we are raised culturally or how we've been conditioned is it is okay for women to cry, but not to be angry. It is okay for men to be angry, but not to cry. So
Yep.
when a lot of men are angry, the emotion underneath is actually sadness or grief, and they feel angry because they feel like that, and the only way that they feel safe expressing it is through anger. Same thing with women. Many times they feel like that feel like crying, but the emotion underneath is anger. But they feel that if they're angry, they're labeled the crazy bitch or something like that. In terms like, okay, I can cry. It is safe for me to cry as a woman, but it's not safe for me to yell and to show real anger. So I think that one thing that I come to discover for myself in the last 2 years or so is every emotion, as you said, is part of the body. It's just is part of the human experience. They're not good or bad emotions in terms of positive or negative. They're just unpleasant. They're not fun. And
Mhm.
for me, one thing that I come to realize after reading the book, The Body Keeps a Score and all of that, is like many of the emotions that are stored in our body came from, childhood things that we were not ready to face, or we didn't have the skills or the capacity to process, and the body kept it there. And in the future, something triggers you. And if you're a man, something makes you feel like crying. This is a quick story that hopefully it can open a lot of people's eyes. Last year, 6 months ago, something happened in my life, an event. It was very like nothing. It wasn't just one of the most normal things, but I needed to make a decision, and I knew that that was going to be the first domino to something that it could potentially bring a lot of fear in me.
Mhm.
Now, what I did was like, okay, I want to do this, and that first step is just the most basic one. So let me sit down. I'm anxious. Let me put some music on. Let me take a deep breath, regulate myself, and then take the action. I still want to make it. I still want to take the action. The moment I sat down and start breathing, I start crying immediately.
Mhm.
And my brain went to, oh, what is wrong with you? I mean, you're going for this small thing you're about to do is nothing. And
Yeah.
I had to really put a lot of effort mentally to bring myself back into the person. Hey, I don't know why I'm crying, but I'm going to let it pass. Afterwards, like 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, when I was like more calm, I did a little introspection. I realized that that small thing activated something from 20 years ago
Mhm.
which I thought I had already overcome, is something that I could easily talk about rationally, but it was always in my system. So the
Mhm.
moment that I release it, the moment I gave my body enough safety to say, hey, it is okay for us to release that emotion, the next 3 or 4 months, it was like waves. Like you open the floodgates, and I came to realize, okay, if my body wants to cry, is it fun? No. Is it pleasant? No. But hey, let's just cry it and let move those things out of our body, because then I believe, maybe I'm wrong here, who knows, that once the emotion is out, then there's no trigger. If there's no trigger, there's no fear associated with that. Therefore, we might not feel as ashamed or maybe not good enough, because the emotion that was repressed in the body has finally left.
Yeah. I don't think it completely goes away. I do think it's like taming a wild animal. It's you're domesticating that emotional part of yourself by not taming it by shutting it down, but allowing it to be wild, if that makes any sense. It probably does. But tears are so good because they detox. They do move the energy, and I love the story that you just shared because I think it's important for people to understand that, because that's where people usually go, no, 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 give me a drug, make it stop. I can't feel this. Well, I don't want to feel this. But when we allow ourselves to feel it, move the energy, yes, I do agree with you that we move emotion, energy, emotion. We move the energy out of our body. The nervous system, though, is still going to be operating under the same system, and there'll be other triggers as well. Stephen Porges, who came up with polyvagal theory, says every action is a reaction seeking safety and survival. So everything we're doing is seeking safety and survival. And so what you did in that moment when you sat down and you went, oh, let me just breathe and see what's here, and the tears came up, and then you connected to an earlier event that was in the body memory, you were able to see that the threat that you were feeling in the moment wasn't present time, it was an old threat, and you moved a lot of that out of your body. That's so good. I mean, that's exactly what we want to do, but how many people are willing? I call it, you have to have, what is it, tenacity, courage, tenacity, commitment. It takes a lot to be able to sit with ourselves. And I think people are running. They want, give me the shaman, give me the ketamine, give me the thing that's going to make this better, when it's all, we got to do it right here. And just what you said, I loved what you said. It's exactly the process. And that people run from that because one, they think They're going to get stuck. They're going to be there forever. Why do I don't want to feel this way. And if I feel this way, then maybe I'll feel this way forever. When it's actually the opposite. If I allow myself to feel my feelings, they move out of me and I get through them, right? And I come to a greater awareness of self. That's hard work, and that takes a lot of courage and commitment. So good job.
Thank you, thank you. And I think to me the reason why I was able to do so is because of the level of awareness and understanding I've gained over the last few years, especially talking to experts about it, reading. I'm fascinated with the human mind and the human body and the stories and reality, all of that. I'm very fascinated by it. So to me, I felt like, okay, if I can catch myself in the right moment, I can sort of take action. In this case, my action is do not shame yourself for this, even though it sounds silly, because what happens is, and of course you know this, but this is for the audience. When you're in those moments of fight or flight, or when you feel like crying, you're emotional. That's not the adult self crying. That is the your inner child, that 10-year-old boy, the 12-year-old boy. It's like you we it's almost like our limbic brain, which is our emotional brain, and our prefrontal cortex are not communicating to each other. So prefrontal cortex is trying to determine exactly what's going on and associates a feeling with the current event, while the nervous system is like, no, this activated something that we want to get out. And it's kind of like understanding that if you are in a moment that feel a lot of anger or fear or sadness or grief, it's not something that it's just happening now. It's just that activated something that you lived in the past. And I think by just having that tiny knowledge and understanding, you can catch yourself. And hopefully, I understand it is unpleasant, it is not fun. You just don't want to feel it. And there are moments where you release a bigger wound, things that have been there for longer, that you might feel like you are dying, that you just want, like, I want the day to be over because it's so overwhelming. And I feel that once we understand that nothing lasts forever and things can move out, is when we can actually um, do that. But is I have a few friends, both men and women, that I have the feeling that they have lived disconnected from their feelings for decades. It's something that they can compartmentalize as, hey, we are not gonna open that door. It is like too dangerous, too thing. It's just, if we open that door, if we open that Pandora's box, we might lose ourselves. We might get overwhelmed. What's a safe way to start reconnecting without getting overwhelmed, without feeling that they're gonna swallow you and you're gonna quote unquote die?
Yeah, and that's good because we don't want to do too much too fast because that's what we call flooding. We get emotionally flooded. So when I say we want to enter into the territory, you definitely have to titrate how much you're going to open up. You open up a little bit and then you put the rest away for a while, and you open up a little bit and you put the rest away because we don't want to get stuck in it. We don't want to drown in it. I have an exercise, and I think I may have sent you the link. If you sign up for my mailing list, you get a free exercise. You can also get it on my website too. I have emotional skill builders under my therapy link. But and this is my number one tool for doing just what you're talking about. So somebody comes in and says, "Oh my God, my husband did XYZ, and I'm just so upset about it, and it's just," or something happened, whatever the situation is. So I took an I statement, which you're probably familiar with because you've studied, psychology and these sorts of things. An I statement was developed for nonviolent conflict resolution rather than saying, Daniel, you're such an idiot. Why don't you just stop, being so stupid or whatever, treating me that way. You go, when you made that comment, I felt a certain way. And what would have felt better to me is, and so it doesn't like blame the other person. It really shares with the other person what they're feeling. However, I've been doing this work for a long time. And what I found is when people try and use that in real time, it activates shame and a nervous system reaction. So this is when we talk a lot about gaslighting. Somebody say, well, I feel, well, what about the way I feel? So even though it's designed for this nonviolent communication and it's a great tool for that. However, oftentimes people still get dysregulated. So I think it's better to use it in the context of a third party mediator unless you've really done a lot of your own emotional work. So that's a tool that I use to do your own emotional work is the I statement. I call it the excavation exercise for inner exploration. So I go here and I define the situation really simply. Here's what happened. You said XYZ, you did XYZ. Then I have a feeling word sheet and I have it in my office, like a whole poster. People look at it all the time because anger is usually easier to identify. Say angry, annoyed, frustrated. That's what people will come in terms of emotional awareness. People don't know there's so many feelings, right? But it's usually they know when they're annoyed, frustrated, or angry. So I say, let's dig a little deeper and let's look at unloved, abandoned, insignificant, unappreciated. I have like 50 words on the board and on this sheet in this handout. And so you just circle all the words and you go, wow. And you start to connect then to what your emotional body is feeling, which we don't usually have language for, back to the logical mind. So we're bringing language to something that is really kind of nonverbal, but we've given it words and it makes more sense than I'm just angry. So anyway, they connect to the feelings, then they go, and this is the harder part, as you go, what I would have preferred is if you and I could have talked differently about the situation, or if you and I could negotiate what we need, I'm not giving you a specific example, so I can't give you a specific example of this part either, but you like imagine what it is you want. And this is hard for people because what happens is they typically don't know what they're feeling and they've shut down their feelings because they've learned they were bad when they were little. And so they also shut down what it is they really want in their lives. They talk themselves out of it. They'll say, oh, well, if I said what I really wanted, I'm never going to get it. So why bother? I don't want to think about what I really want because I'm not going to get it anyway. And so I'm not even going to think about it. I'm like, well, let's pretend you're a kid, use your imagination. What would you really want? And you have to detach from the outcome of actually getting it. Because what you're doing is you're identifying your authentic self. You're identifying your true desire. The hard part is you may or may not ever get it from this person in real time, but you've accessed and identified parts of yourself that have been hidden, that you're feeling and your desires and your longing and who you truly are. And then you come back to self. It's amazing how fast my clients move through things just by doing this exercise. So then when they bring it in, the exercise, or we do it together, they do it for homework. I do what's connect the dots. So let's take this feeling. Let's go back to childhood when you felt that way. And like with your example of mom saying, well, what about the counter? I bet you, if you connect the dots from what you learned and do it the inverse way from what you described, because you learned, okay, well, I did that in my marriage. Well, what if it was happening in my marriage and then I connected the dot, if that makes sense. So it's like, this is what we're in present time, and here's what's happening. And then I'm going to excavate the feeling and the desire just for present day thing and maybe talk to the other person, but preferably with a third party person, not being attached to the outcome. But then the real work is connecting the dots into, okay, so what's the earliest memory of this feeling that I'm excavating here in this exercise? So say, again, that's what I'm saying, it's inverse. So if you had noticed it while you were still married, you present time, this situation happened, you and your ex-wife got into a fight about something, and that feeling of being, I don't know, what feeling comes up when your mom said that, or something happened in your marriage? I mean, can you think of a feeling word of that feeling? I'm inadequate. I'm obviously not good enough. Anyway, so without a specific example, it's harder to do, but that's my tried and true tool and technique that I think is amazing. I mean, people it blows their minds because they're like, I didn't know I felt that way. I didn't even know I wanted that. And then the grief around, what if I can't ever have that in this situation or with this person? That's hard too.
Yeah, I think that I believe that curiosity might be our greatest superpower and it's highly underrated.
Hmm.
And me being always curious has helped me a lot. And
Oh,
to
yeah.
excavate and to understand, like, okay, okay, if this is happening, okay, why? And that's how I understand other people. Now, I didn't feel safe emotionally in my house because I didn't feel that people, especially my dad, could reflect and mirror back my emotional state, right? So to me, I never suppressed my emotions. I just isolated myself and protected myself just to feel it. So I ended up becoming the friend or the person I wish I had in childhood, right?
Mhm.
But when you said about not not desiring anything, and even though my divorce was painful, was awful, we're still friends even after 2 years of being divorced. It taught me so much about myself afterwards, just a lot of introspection. There was one moment, and this is people that might not even think about this. I think 2 or 3 years before we got divorced, it was my birthday, or my birthday was coming up, and she asked me where I wanted to go, a restaurant or something like that. I was like, I don't know, and she asked me, well, don't you think about that? It's like, no. I mean, it's like I never think about what I wanted. And I remember years later that there was one specific moment in childhood that I wanted something, and it happened like 30 times in a row when I got no, no, no. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'll never think about anything again. But the interesting part about that is that when we were trying to save our marriage and we were just trying to figure it out, I remember that I was running as a way to cope with depression because that's another thing. I was in deep depression, and she asked me if I wanted to have dinner or something like that. I said, hey, look, I'm going for a run and then I'll have to shower. So. And she said, oh, well, because now you have your priorities. And I sat with her. I was like, okay, that was mean, but I cannot blame her because I conditioned her that my parents were never a thing because I didn't have any. And all came from a tiny story in childhood that why bother? Why get disappointed? Why desiring something if at the end of the day I don't want to go through the pain of not getting it? And you talk about grief, which I think that is something that I think that if you can just dive a little bit deeper into that, one thing I found out about grief is that most of us never fully process grief, and the reason why I realized about this is I thought I had grief my marriage and other things a while back. It took me like 18 months to truly get out of it. Last year, towards the end of last year, I burnt out emotionally. I was just drained. I couldn't just keep going. So I booked a cabin in the middle of the woods just to be by myself, to breathe and to recharge. And one thing I didn't realize is so much grief came out of my body, so much of tears. And I was like, I thought we were done with grieving. I thought that it's just, and it seems like we always stop and we keep reliving the same situation because the body's still afraid of something that hasn't fully processed yet, whether it's in relationships, like people keep attracting either toxic people or emotionally unavailable people, or even at work, or even our friendships. It's just the grief that never completed, or was never completed, then creates this vicious cycle that we can't get out because we never understand why. How what have you found about that?
Well, we always reenact trauma, and grief is trauma. And so there's several pieces of your question is that grief, I think, is our greatest teacher. So when you even mentioned divorce, death, divorce, those are big griefs, the biggest ones, right? They teach us things. They ask. What I'm hearing you say is it pushed me to ask the bigger questions. It pushed me to go inside and really look at things I may not want to look at, and I'm still looking at them. And that's what grief does to us. we do reenact situations in our lives, like you said, the same partner over and over. And again, because it's again, it's familiar, it's a body memory. And eventually we get to a point in our lives where, well, some of us do, some of us don't, where we go, maybe I don't want to do that anymore. But then again, it's like retraining the nervous system. And a lot of it is giving ourselves permission. All feelings are okay, but all behavior isn't. So, and it's tricky because we don't have really a good frame of reference and practice for what that is like. And so again, I want to go back to curiosity around the other exercise I do is I call the ABCs. So when you're in a situation where you're feeling triggered about something, acknowledge you got a feeling. Take a deep breath. That's the most important piece, is taking that breath. Okay. And then move into, I call it sea shovels, but the first four C's, the first one is curiosity. And sometimes I think I want to revise this exercise and just leave curiosity in there because it's hard. Again, like you said, the frontal lobe's offline. The idea is getting back online. You have four sea shovels. I have to remember which one, but the sea shovels are curiosity, compassion, connection, and um, courage. Did I say courage, compassion, connection, curiosity? But curiosity to me is the best one because when we're in curiosity, we can't be in shame. Because and Ted Lasso, did you ever watch this show, Ted
Yeah.
Lasso, where he says, be curious, not judgmental? So your curiosity it works for you. It works for all of us, but we get so in our fear that it's hard to access curiosity. So ABCs: acknowledge I got a feeling, take a breath, and be curious, or have, compassion for yourself, or be courageous.
I definitely love that a lot because even we see it in society nowadays, how divisive we are with the left, right, men and women. Uh, Either how, yeah, I think it's more so at an identity level as how that if somehow, some way, acknowledging your pain will diminish mine is and when I see behaviors in people, I'm like, okay, let me truly understand why, right? And sometimes I'm with friends, I'm like, and they look at me weirdly. It's like, just let it be. It's like, but I, I, I don't. I mean, I need to understand. I just need to understand exactly. Let me find the ways how it makes sense for me. Let me try to see the world from their lens. I don't have to agree with it. I just need to understand how they got there, right? It's just and that would, as you know, until last we would take the judgment out of it. I think that the scene that he said that was while when playing darts, probably. If I'm not mistaken, but yeah, it's so hard because the first thought or the first feeling we have is just either fear or shame or anger, and almost like, as you said, our prefrontal cortex is just nowhere to be found, like, MIA, and it's hard to be curious about it. And I think just going, kind of bringing us back to present and take a deep breath, that's how we can just, okay, let me pump the brakes and see the whole picture and see what
Right.
happens.
And that's why I came up with
Mhm.
ABC, because I wanted to be something people could remember easily. And ABC, I mean, if you talk about acronyms, it's probably the easiest one to remember. Acknowledge I got a feeling, take a deep breath, use a sea shovel. Curiosity being, a really good one. And then later on, you go do the excavation exercise later on at night. You go, oh, here's what was coming up for me. Here's what I was feeling. Here's what I wanted. And then you connect the dots. So that's the way my whole model works, and again, it's not quick and easy, but it's that ABC it in the moment, and compassion's a good sea shovel too. There's have compassion with ourselves because we're learning. We're human.
Where can people find you, work with you, anything?
Pretty much everything's on my website, which is pattyashley.com, and I spell it with an I, PATTIASHLEY. And yeah, Instagram, same thing. Dr. Patti Ashley. So pretty easy to find everything on my website, which has a lot on it. So
Yeah, thank you. I'll have to bring you back tons of other questions, but thank you for your time.
yeah,
And yes, talk to you soon.
you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It was great. I enjoyed our conversation.